Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a live, and it's live because I've been away for a day and a half and I've got so much stuff to catch up with. And I've never done a live with my Ukraine war update videos. I've done lots of lives before, which are just interviews of me and other people. So that involves me and another person, the cameras, and that's very simple. I hope that this will work in terms of me manipulating all these different tabs and going through the usual stuff I go through. If anyone wants to put live, if there's any issues, please let me know. And this will be a very short live because I won't be able to do it. But no, I'm hoping that all the tech will work. I'm going to do a little bit of a map update, but to be fair, I'm going to be perfectly frank here. My map research today will be less than normal because I've literally just got in from a 4.5 hour drive from the north of the country, where I've been at an ice skating tournament for one of my twins, and so I've been away for a day and a half. I've done some research throughout the day, and here I am. So it is what it is. Hopefully, it is of some use to some people somewhere in the world. Anyway, so let's have a quick look at what has happened, and before I go on to the sort of front line, look at the things on the front line. Let's have a look at a few things that have happened as pertaining to Ukraine from kind of outside Ukraine. So Belarus has continued to transfer its military equipment to the Russian troops. Here's an echelon of 20 BMPs that's left for Luhansk. Thus, over the past month, the Belarusian government has transferred to the needs of Russia at least 94 T-72A tanks, 36 to 44 euros, those and 20 BMP. So here are some of these BMP. And due to the brilliance of open source intelligence, you can just track all this. I mean, here is a video of the stuff being tracked, and people know whether it is pretty much live, and that's pretty incredible. So anyway, Belarus are producing lots more stuff for Russia and helping them out. Okay, let's move on. Actually, we'll talk about Svatova in a minute. I'll come back to that. So, up in Russia, two Ka-52 attack helicopters, and I think other helicopters as well, were blown up. And there's a video that is out that is supposedly of someone preparing the munitions. So, a video surfaced allegedly showing the planting of explosive charges on a Russian Ka-52 helicopter by saboteur on the Vrety air base in Pskov Oblast. According to Russian media, two helicopters there were damaged due to unknown explosions on the 30th of October, and possibly more helicopters. A lot of you will have heard about this already. This is crazy new stuff. The sources are claiming not two but three explosive devices went off in Pskov training facility airstrip, and a fourth one didn't go off. Earlier, it was known that Russian journalists could freely roam around the base, take pictures of helicopters, and walk away without being asked. And so, it's any surprise that there's not too much security on that base. But here is someone just clearly apparently putting explosives onto helicopters, and that is going to be pretty damaging and embarrassing for the Russians. Um, Audio is a bit breaking apparently. Please let me know if that continues. It could be because I've just got so much going on here. Okay, so I will continue regardless. I'm going to use a map just to show you an update, and this is a map from Andrew Perpetua. And this map is pretty useful in showing what has happened over the last day and a half. We've got this grey zone of contested area right down. So this is the Kupiansk down to Svatova front line. Sorry, I should explain because not everyone knows what I'm talking about and what's in my head. So here we have Ukraine. In fact, if we go to my war mapper map, that's often a good place to start. So we're looking to begin with at this northeastern front line. If I zoom in a little bit, this is Kupiansk down to Svatova, down to Kremina, and then we'll follow it right down to Bakhmut, Avdivka, which is just to the west of Donetsk. That's Avdivka, and then we're going to come down to Vuhledar and across to Kherson, Kherson in the end. Okay, so that's where we're going to go. Let's take ourselves back to Andrew Perpetua's map. So here we are. Here's the map that shows that the Ukrainians are still um, pushing in the Kupiansk down to Kremina front. And in fact, there is some rumor out today, I think, that this place, Chervona Popivka, further down south along. So here's Svatove. As we continue down here, we've heard that the P66 highway has been breached, and there's certainly fire control over this highway that the Ukrainians have. There is some rumor from supposedly from Rybar, but I can't verify that at the moment because it's all a bit rushed. That Ukrainians might well be in Chervona Popivka. Um, Russians possibly pushing back further south in the usual sort of Torsky to Terny area. And Belarivka is a source of quite a lot of pressure from several flanks at the moment. But certainly, this is the area to look out for, Chervona Popivka, because that is a really important staging place for further incursions eastwards from the P66, either to encircle Kremina or to have a larger encirclement of Svatova, because Svatova is that important hub. But the problem is uh, the mobilized troops really are apparently moving into these lines and are going to be at least somewhat useful. Um, in plugging holes. Now, yeah, we talked before, or I say we've talked. I do the talking. You guys, well, you chat in the comments and we interact. So yeah, we have talked. We talked before about how the mobilized troops may or may not be useful. But I think in a defensive position now, as we're approaching winter, putting those boots on the ground, even if they've got crap weaponry, crap training, low morale, right? These guys are going to be somewhat useful in a purely defensive scenario. The Ukrainians didn't take advantage of that momentum for whatever reason. They would have stopped for some good reason, I would have thought. But the critics are saying, well, they've lost the momentum and now it's too late to actually continue this further push in the northeast. It's slightly different in Kherson because they've cut all the supply off. So this is perhaps a death by a thousand cuts, and it's a Greek tragedy waiting to happen. So this will happen, irrespective of momentum, just because of the setup of this region. But it's slightly different up in this northeast, especially when you've got these mobilized troops being able to shore up these lines. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this breach of the P66 highway will, you know, how it will materialize and what will happen thereafter. So we go back to Andrew Perpetua's map. We'll just zoom out a little bit. As you can see, Bilorivka down here is under a lot of pressure, and then we go back to our usual positions of Bakhmut. There's another Bilorivka. There we are. Here we are. So Bakhmut apparently is holding out, and even though as you can see, Andrew Perpetua says there's pressure still in Solidar and Bakhmutsky and Vesela Dolinia area and Zaitseve area. The the Ukrainians are saying that they are pretty solid there, and there haven't been any sort of further movements from the Russians. I'll try and find the claims of that. So let's get some other sources that defend what I've been saying. So in Svatove, this is Defmon, who's pretty on the ball with his mapping and geolocation. He's extended the Ukrainian area and the operations to the north based on geolocated videos. I'm also assuming combat in the area of the detected fires in the south. So this is, I think, moving towards Chervona Popivka. So that kind of backs up what I've been saying there. Let's close that down. Pro-Russians in the Svatove area about the situation in and around the city are saying, this is a quote, as it is, everything is not very good in our direction, slowly giving up territory. So it looks like there's general good news for the Ukrainians in the Svatove area, but it's not quick. So this is going back to the Bakhmut point I was just making before, which there may be explosions and bangs here and there, but Bakhmut is under our control. Of course, here's a guy saying that, Um, he is standing, by the looks of it, probably in the middle of Bakhmut. Again, if I was to be skeptical, it might be quite easy to say that, but it says very little about actually what's going on around the outskirts of Bakhmut. You know, Opitne, Ivanhrad, uh, Klishchivka here. But most of the claims seem to be that Ukraine have, as when they pushed the Russians back last week, they have consolidated those gains and then moved into the defensive position. So again, it will be interesting to see what happens this week. But Bakhmut seems to be the thorn in the Russian side that never goes away, and it's just you've got good troops, good Ukrainian troops in that area, able to defend that well. So anyway, that's his claim. Um, just a little side note here, in that, just wanted to make a point about. I'm not necessarily saying these are beautiful buildings here, but just think of all the beautiful buildings of culture that has been destroyed, never to be able to be replaced because it's historical. There aren't those. You can maybe make replicas of those buildings, but they're not the original buildings. It reminds me of when ISIS destroyed those big, was it Buddhist statues, some years ago, and it's just like, wow, all that culture. Just, you think of Palmyra in Syria, and all these places were just jam packed. Aleppo, loads of culture there, and historical buildings destroyed, and they'll never come back. And it's just, there's a great sadness, isn't there, in that. And the hope is that, like a phoenix, something great will rise from the ashes, and the rubble. So yeah, there we go. Um, what else do we have to say? So that's going on towards Kherson, so we won't go there yet. Let's go back to this map, Andrew Perpetua's map, and thank you for doing this great work. As you can see, there are lots of red arrows, and red arrows indicate where the Russians are putting the pressure on. Blue arrows indicate where the Ukrainians. So the Ukrainians are putting pressure on in the Svatova area. Sorry, my pronunciation. I just go back to my incorrect pronunciation. And in the Chervona Popivka area, but everywhere else appears to be pretty much Russian pressure, and a lot of pressure around Avdivka. This is a very slow, incremental set of gains by the Russians. The another Opitne, just south of Avdivka, and Vodyane, where apparently, Russians, as I said before, that hasn't particularly changed. So I'm going to go back to my map here, um, and just show you, just because I think there's a nice bit of clarity here. Uh, Here we have Vodyane, and it is broadly 50-50 splits, uh, where there is a sort of road that cuts through Vodyane. That's where I've drawn a line. That's where most people seem to be drawing a line. But it could be that actually the Russians have a little bit more than that. But anyway, that is where it's all happening. And if that goes, you can imagine that Opitne would be next. So yeah, a bit of trouble for the Ukrainians there. If we pop back to Andrew Perpetua's map, and we go there. There's action happening in Marinka as well. I'm sure I've got something on that. I've got so much stuff open today that it is a bit confusing for me. So no, but yeah, certainly there is stuff going on in Marinka. No, I can't find it. I do apologize. This is what happens when it's live, and I've got too much stuff open. Um, yeah, it doesn't matter. So yeah, Marinka is a area of hot activity, but I think they're basically being suppressed, the Russians, and repelled. And then we come down to, and again, all these arrows represent Russian pressure. We come down to Vuhledar. So in this Vuhledar area, let me give you a little bit of detail as to what's going on, and it might be useful to be able to zoom in here a little bit. Go away. That, yes, go away. Right. Okay. So here we have Pavlivka, uh, which is just south of Vuhledar. And I showed you the topographical map the other day to show you that there is some elevation with Vuhledar, so that Pavlivka, even if the Russians gain Pavlivka, it's still it's pretty difficult for them because actually the buildings up here can see these buildings of Pavlivka really easily, and you've got sniper and mortar and all the other sort of ways of attacking Pavlivka that that give the advantage to the Ukrainians here. And indeed, as far as I understand it, Ukraine did lose Pavlivka earlier on in this conflict and then retook it. And they were able to retake it precisely because they had the elevation of Vuhledar. So this is going to be a tough nut, I think, for the Russians to crack. But they are pushing into Pavlivka, and there are different theories, as different claims as to what buildings they have and exactly where they are. There have been some reinforcements around this whole area. Actually, there's a unit I think that's come from over here that's helped them, but also the 93rd Brigade from Bakhmut is providing some assistance here, and that is certainly helping. And the Ukrainians also pushed a counter to let's get the road up because the road are not on here. There we go. Okay, so this road coming down here is quite an important road because it connects these towns and you can ship people backwards and forwards. However, it is under um, fire control apparently uh, from the Russians. So this is it's dangerous to use that road. And of course, there's quite a lot of agriculture area around here, which means the smaller roads are going to be more difficult to navigate, and there's going to be a lot of mud. And in fact, the Russians are pushing back all so although the Ukrainians did do a counterattack here to try and establish positions further south of this road, I believe the Russians have been pushing right back. So there's lots of pressure from the Russians both in Pavlivka and also further eastwards here. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense so far. Let me just have a little look at the live comments, see if anything is happening. Hello, everyone. Wow, lots of people. In fact, good, almost 200 people watching this. So thank you so much for joining me, um, and greetings to you all. I hope my audio isn't breaking too much. So if we're going to move along to Kherson. So not much happening along the Zaporizhia front, as you can see. No arrows from Andrew Perpetua's map here. And actually no arrows here. And this is partly because there's just not a lot of information coming out of Kherson. We hear about, big explosions, and we hear about certain things going on more in Kherson and partisan activity, but not a lot of information about movements of troops and territory. Is that because of operational security? Is that because there's a yet another pause? Are we waiting? Is this the calm before the storm? Or are the Ukrainians unable to push effectively because there are maybe 40,000 Russian troops in this region, and they are some of the best troops. Your VDV and other I think airborne divisions and just decent troops here, which means this is going to be really difficult for the Ukrainians to take, especially if they're going to have an urban battle in Kherson. But it might be that that's ideal. The Ukrainians might be happy with that because there could be plans afoot to attack elsewhere. Something I've talked about before, which is if you fix the Russian forces here, 40,000 of your better troops here, then this is a perfect time to then amass some forces in Zaporizhia and push down for Melitopol or Berdyansk or Mariupol. So there are lots of options open there for what can happen. There have been so let's just read a little bit of information about the Kherson area. General Staff reports that Russia is displacing civilians in Kakhovka in the Kherson region. Citizens living in apartments along the banks of the Dnieper are forcibly evicted from their homes. Russians are engineering fortifications and barriers around those housings afterwards. So they're kicking civilians out, taking over the housing, and then fortifying the housing. What this indicates is that no urban battles are easy. When the Russians eventually, with the Syrian regime, Assad's regime, took Aleppo in Syria, it was broadly because they could use barrel bombs full of chemical warfare, and they just had no moral problem with doing that. but it had been a long time coming. Aleppo was just, uh, to use that metaphor again, a tough nut to crack. Uh, Kherson will be difficult for the Ukrainians if the Russians fortify themselves in there, because, as I've said many, many times before, if you're doing rural fighting, you need a 3-to-1 advantage. If you're doing urban fighting, you can double, triple that, 6-9-to-1 advantage. And if you are causing more rubble to the city, then it actually works in favor of the defenders. More hidey holes to and foxholes to hide in, and cover to take, and so it becomes really difficult for the Ukrainians going forward if the Russians are doing this. Also, it's reported in Novochornomoria, Shadovsky district, that Russian servicemen are psychologically and physically putting pressure on civilians. They are basically getting kicked out of their homes to make Kherson an unbounded war zone. So that is not good news. Good news for the Ukrainians going forward. Okay, two more of Russia's helicopters have been hit in quick succession this evening. So this would have been yesterday. The Ka-52 alligators were both down within 3 minutes near Berislav in the Kherson region. They were struck by the Odessa command. So just to let you know, if we come over to Kherson using my map, just because it's nice and clear and clean, doesn't have too much stuff on it. So we go over to Kherson. This is broadly incorrect, my lines there, but this is how it was like a week ago. This is all contested. So I have my blue line there because that's the furthest Ukrainians claim they got, but I don't think they're claiming they're there now. The Russians are claiming they're up here. The reality is there's going to be, this is a grey zone. But Berislav is the very important settlement that's just on the right bank of the Dnipro River, which is to say the west bank here. And two Ka-52s have been hit around there, which is just adding to the massive list of helicopter losses that the Russians have experienced. Reports of strikes in Russian-occupied Kozatsky. Something is burning Kherson in Kherson. So that's Kozatsky. That is somewhere around here. Not exactly sure where that was. So sorry about that, but it looks to be somewhere along the Dnipro bank. So again, what I'm trying to say by this is that when things are quiet, or at least you don't hear lots of information, that doesn't mean to say that the Ukrainians, for example, aren't bombing the heck out of different targets and hitting them with HIMARS, hitting them with all sorts. So that's just add to that. Okay, this is quite interesting. So um, we've had the reports that the Russians forces are bringing more and more concrete bunkers into their lines of defense in Kherson region, and these these pillboxes. Now, the original claim, I didn't talk about this, but this actually happened maybe 3 days ago now. There was talk that they would bring them down to this like isthmus, this peninsula here, and that's an interesting place to put those concrete bunkers or pillboxes. But I suppose they're being just brought in, all over the shop now. Um, we'll see whether they are, you know, useful, whether they give the Russian defenses something. Concrete is a pretty decent material, can withstand quite a lot. The Trentelenko often talks about how the Russians just haven't got a handle on prefabricated concrete structures. So for building bridges or for being able to get across a river, and you can get loads of prefab concrete stuff, whack them down really easily, and then broadly go over that. But the Russians should just be really poor at doing stuff like that. But here they are finally getting a handle on some prefabricated concrete structures. And then on the other side, instead of using these pillboxes to kill people or defensively kill people, I guess, this is evidence that Ukraine are using similar structures as mobile bomb shelters, and they're being installed here at Dnipro, not far from public transport stops. There will be concrete structures designed to protect people during an air raid. A total of 28 structures are planned to be installed, so that's pretty cool. Good stuff. I don't know why I've got that. Damn, I wanted that. I've just got rid of something because I panicked. So That's basically the front lines. I'm now going to do some talking about other things. Oh, that's so annoying. This is a really important. Uh, it's now gone behind a paywall because I've just got rid of it and refreshed it. But anyway, there's a very good article in the Financial Times based on a bunch of excellent investigative reporting they've done, and I was going to read you a bunch of it. I'll have to do it by memory now. So just to let you know, this is about great. So I've done the front lines as much as I know at the moment. Sorry if that isn't as good quality information as normal, but it's been a little bit rushed for me today. So this is we're now going to talk. I'm going to do my Ukraine war update, extra nuggets live. We're going to talk about Berdyansk here, or at least an example of how Russia has been stealing grain from Ukraine and then selling it off themselves. So the Financial Times done a superb bit of investigative reporting to show that a Russian businessman has got this basically sort of kind of shell company or this constructed company that is doing dodgy paperwork and then selling grain to in this case they followed this one particular boat that went to a lesser known port in Turkey and has been and they've sold the grain, even though Turkey is getting a bit hotter on like checking stuff over. It didn't take much to fool them, or they were fine with being fooled, or whatever. However you want to read that, the grain shipments are being basically stolen by Russia and sold abroad. And they've done investigation in terms of logistics. They've been talking to smugglers. They've been talking to all sorts of people. Really uh, great bit of investigative journalism, as I've said, and I really wanted to share it with you more directly, and I've cocked it up. So sorry about that, but you can go and check it out. The article is called "How Russia Secretly Takes Grain from Occupied Ukraine," and usually, if you share this stuff on social media, you seem to be able to read it, but then when you try and refresh it, it puts it behind a paywall. So apologies for that. Another little nugget here's, and this is a bit of sort of almost Top Gun esque proper, like I don't know, propaganda is the right word. It is sort of propaganda, but it's just saying, here's Karaya. This that's a call sign of this fighter pilot, Ukrainian Air Force fighter pilot. And he's recently shot down 2 cruise missiles and 5 Shahed drones over Vinnytsia. But anyway, it's just pretty cool pictures of a pilot flying in the sky. So I'll just play you this. I'd take off the music just in case I get copyright infringement. But you, you know, Ukrainian militant, nice, interesting title. But some of this, just the footage is pretty spectacular. And sometimes when they do things like those spins like that in the air, do they do that just just for a bit of fun? I'm sure that has no practical use in that particular situation. Didn't look like he's under any pressure or anything like that. I guess it's like, yeah, I can, so I will. Anyway, it's just some nice footage, and how important. What I wanted to say really in showing you this was how active the Ukrainian Air Force still are, which is the Ukrainian Air Force that the Russians at the beginning of the war claimed that they're completely destroyed. There are some claims to say that 80% of the Air Force is still active, which is phenomenal. And they're obviously going to be training new pilots up, and and pilots are being trained in America. I wonder on what and elsewhere. But I wonder on what piece of kit they are being trained on. Whether they are eventually going to be introducing sort of NATO fighter craft to because what's happened is you keep having these thresholds say, oh, we're not going to provide this, we're not going to provide this. Oh, Russia's done that, we are going to provide this. And then right, the worry is that it's all so escalatory, except it's not really, because Russia have pretty much done everything apart from chemical weapons and nuclear war. So we keep pushing the boundaries, and it's actually fine. And so therefore the argument is we should have pushed those boundaries way earlier. But then you get these different theories, like I've talked about, whether this is a way of eking out the war to completely debilitate Russia's capabilities and capacity. So if you give Ukraine only just enough stuff all the time, then what you are doing is taking out Russia for the long term. which is kind of what Lloyd Austin, the US Secretary of Defense, said in April. Like, you know, we want to degrade Russia's capability for the long term. Well, possibly the best way of doing that is to not give Ukraine everything all at once, but just eke it out and do it slowly. But that will just fundamentally degrade Russia's armed forces. But that's just a theory. It's a theory that I favour. I think it's quite useful in explaining certain things, but it might not be correct. So Peskov, there's been Britain has been under the cosh recently. Russia's blaming us for loads of stuff. They're blaming us for the uncrewed surface vehicles, the sea drones that attacked the Black Sea fleet the other day. They're blaming us for that. They're blaming us for the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines being, sabotaged. Uh, it's yeah, whatever. But it's quite interesting that Russia seemed to think the UK. I was listening to someone sort of talking about this recently. I think it might be Michael Clark on Sky News, just saying that actually it's quite nice for them to blame us for stuff because it shows that they still think we're actually big players in the global sphere. Uh, and so I suppose it's quite nice for us to be sort of targeted in that way. Whether there's truth to it, I don't know. There are so many different theories about the Nord Stream 1 and 2. Who knows? But I said the other day that I thought those drones, the uncrewed surface vessels, might well have been UK provided. And I still stand by that. It's just speculation, mere speculation. But it's the sort of thing that I think we would get involved in, and I'm sure we did right at the beginning of the campaign give over some USVs, and we didn't give any details about them. And I must find the source of that because I remember that right at the beginning of the war. So anyway, there you go. Peskov saying that we're to blame, but Moscow will think about further steps, which is all rather ominous, isn't it? Um, Okay, let's have a look at some of the comments you guys have said. Duh, 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 duh. Um, lots of things. I don't know if I've got anything I can react to particularly. Um, but thank you for all having a lively chat in the live chat, and that's really cool. Thank you so much for 10K. That's really kind of you for your super chat there, and I appreciate the donation. I really do. It means an awful lot. Um, so thank you. If anyone has any super chats and questions, they will get asked because I get to see them because they get flagged up and they're colourful. Okay, let's move on swiftly on. So this is CNN doing another bit of sort of investigative journalism or some journalism to show that or claim that Iran is actually preparing to send additional weapons. So actually, there was a claim. So we know that the Duran drones these were actually Shahed drones. So we know, everyone knows. The Russians have admitted it accidentally. I showed you that video of a Russian person on TV caught in a hot mic episode where he said, "Don't ask me about those drones. Everyone knows we're we're getting them from Iran, but we're denying it." And that was caught on a hot mic, which is delightful. So, and then Iran admitted it as well. But then they've just recently said, actually, no, we've sold it to them before the war, but we haven't sold them anything since the war began. Uh, but that's obviously a load of BS, in my opinion. Um, and now CNN say Iran is preparing to send approximately 1,000 additional weapons, including surface-to-surface short-range ballistic missiles and more attack drones to Russia to use in its war against Ukraine. Officials from a Western country that closely monitors Iran's weapons program told CNN. So again, this is all a bit, under the radar, so to speak. I did want to play you, but I just haven't got the clip ready. So sorry about that. But there was a clip from Ukraine the Latest, the Telegraph podcast from yesterday's episode, where they were talking about. So there's been lots of talk in my threads about really how many cruise missiles does Russia have left. And I've been talking about, well, this shows that they're running out of cruise missiles. And then someone saying, well, yeah, if they're running out, how are they still sending across 50 in one day type thing? But the idea that they're using S300 and using these other things shows that they are running low. But running low can mean lots of different things. So it could mean they've only got 5 left, but it could mean they've got 200 left. But actually, that's not that many for a big war. And so there were some figures thrown out yesterday that came from, I think, the 10th of October that indicated that they are running out. But what running out means is they still got quite a few of them, just not nearly as many as they should have in this scenario. But I don't want to quote the numbers just in case I get them completely wrong. But I'll do that in tomorrow's extra video. This is worrying though, because Iran, they're playing a dangerous game for themselves, because it's not going to end well for Iran. I'm sure it's not. Um, yeah, especially since they've got their own internal problems. So there's some uh, rumors coming out today that Iran might start a war with Saudi Arabia to kind of like divert attention from their internal struggles. If if you have a common enemy, then it brings everyone together. I always think the only way that we're all going to be brought together as a world is to have aliens attack us. It's like, yeah, we're all bickering, we all hate each other. Uh, we do that locally, in all our countries. We'll have like, oh, I'm from here, I hate people from there. For example, I'm from near Portsmouth. Everyone from near Portsmouth always has to go people from Southampton. People from Southampton hate people from Portsmouth. And you have these ongoing things. But as soon as you're attacked by someone from outside the UK, then you put all that aside and you've got a common enemy. It's your in-group, out-group psychology. And then suddenly, your in-group gets bigger because there's this out group that's more threatening, that isn't just your local guys. So could it be that Iran are planning to do something stupid in order to try and unite their country, which is becoming really fractious at the moment and factional? Um, Okay, Gazprom has reported data on a decline of its production and exports for 10 months to 2022. Production has decreased by 18.6% to 3 billion cubic meters, and exports have decreased by 42.6%. Wow. To 91.2 billion cubic meters. Now, remember, they were producing so much uh, that they were having to burn it off because they couldn't sell it to anyone quickly enough, because everyone was, all the sanctions were being put in place, and then the whole Nord Stream and all that kind of stuff. This is further bad news for Russia, and the sustainability of their economic sort of model, if you like, is shot. I mean, Russia are in trouble. They've got this far for this long has been amazing, but it's through artificially propping up their currency that they did a pretty good job of saving themselves initially. But it's all about the gas and oil, and if that as an industry falls apart, they've got all their eggs in that basket. All their other industries have been decimated by sanctions, and so realistically, it's all about natural resources. And if this is anything to go by, then that could be in trouble as well. Um, this is, and again, this is a Financial Times article, which is behind a paywall every time I try and look at it, but this is not the first time this problem has raised its ugly head, which is Germany. So Ukraine's supplies of anti-aircraft shells are critically low. As ever, when you're firing off these stuff all the time, particularly when they've got these Gepards, it looks like a Gepard or Gepard, which is an autocannon and radar. Autocannon's got a 5 kilometer range. The radar is sort of uh, 35, 25 kilometer range, but you network these together. They're really useful, and they're really useful for shooting down the drones. I showed you video footage of that happening at night. Now, if they're running low on these shells, which is unsurprising because they're shooting them off loads, then Germany has a stockpile. That's brilliant. But they're unfortunately, the rounds were made by Switzerland, and Switzerland have this really tight policy of not of I presume it's connected with their neutrality, political neutrality. So they put a veto on anyone giving or selling their stuff that they have made and already sold to other countries. So it seems weird that they're fine with selling it, in one situation, but then selling it again, they put a veto on. So there are loads of stuff that Switzerland has been responsible for making that has been unable to be given to Ukraine. And this is another example, and this is making people in Germany pretty angry because they've got the will, they've got the desire, they've got the ability to help Ukraine here. Uh, as far as they're concerned, but then Switzerland are putting a kibosh on that. So that's a bit of a problem. Let's look at a bit of propaganda. So this is something that happens in a couple of different contexts. Here is I can't testify to the actual Russian here, but here is a case of a video of somewhere being sort of, I guess, taken and Russia here. So this is how Russian propaganda works. A known pro-Russian Telegram channel shares the same footage twice here, only changing the location in favor of Russian troops to show a fake victory. First, the footage was in Vuhledar, now in Mykolaiv. Tomorrow from Torsky. So the idea is say, look, we've taken this area, and they show a bit of footage to support the claim that they've taken an area. And then in another place, they say, look, we've taken this area and use the same footage. This is something they've done throughout the war, and they do it with other things. So Ukraine Weapons Tracker, and Oryx, who are great open source intelligence sources, who have been counting up the amount of destroyed, captured, damaged uh, pieces of armament uh, th- throughout the extent of this war, and they've done it with other conflicts as well, but they have to be really, really careful. And this particularly happens from Russians purposefully. So the Russians will capture a Ukrainian vehicle and they'll take a picture from it, and then they'll take another picture from it from a different angle, and from a different angle, and then move it and take another picture. And the- in the end, there are six claims that this vehicle has been captured, looking like six different vehicles, but it's actually the same vehicle that's been photographed differently six times because they're trying to fudge the stats. It's propaganda. Here, they're doing a similar sort of thing in a slightly different context, but it's the same deal, really. Just open source. I mean, you got to feel sorry for people like Oryx who are counting up these things and having to go pour through all this video and photograph footage, and then the longer the war goes on and the more stuff that's captured, destroyed, or damaged, the greater their catalog of previous stuff is, the longer it takes to verify. So as the war goes on, verifying new pieces of armament that have been lost or damaged or destroyed takes increasingly longer to do. So hats off to them, props to those guys who are tirelessly working on that. Okay, Russian state TV. This is fascinating. I'm not going to play you at all. Let's just play you a few seconds, and I'll read out what the tweet says. So I'll read it just in case. "To live in a world where I'd be prohibited to put dresses on my daughters and to explain to my son that he is a boy. I don't want to live in a humanity where some governmental institutions will take this right away from me. The way it's already happening in many countries, for me, it's unbearable. For me, this is worse than war. Worse than war. Wa- So this is like culture war narratives 101. Just no one does that. You name me one country where you can't put a dress on your daughter. You name like this gets my goat, right? I do a lot of political argumentation. I'm arguing over this for a long time. Culture wars narratives are almost always complete bollocks. And this is a great example. So this is the whole kind of gender identity, trans, all this kind of stuff. Just, but it's what's called a straw man. So a straw man argument is presenting something you're arguing against, but presenting it so incorrectly that it's easy to knock down. It's like a straw man rather than a steel man. If you want to argue really well against another position, you should build it up to be the best version of that position. That's called steel manning, and then take it down. Because if you've done a really good job of presenting the opposing arguments and you've taken them down, then you've done a great job. But if you're going to straw man, which is misrepresent the arguments or the opposition, and then take that down, you're just basically it's smoke and mirrors. So what she's saying is like, it's God, it's worse than death. It's worse than war if we can't put our girls in dresses and call our boys boys. It's like, yeah, that literally happens in no country in the world. Like nowhere is that a thing. It's just this invented cultural load of rubbish. But this is fits into the larger narrative of spooking out Russian people and saying this is what America is. I remember, was it Vladimir Klitsch? No, it wasn't. It wasn't. No, no, no. It was a Russian boxer. I was listening to an interview recently. I can't remember, but I'm sure it's like a Russian boxer and his entourage that went over to America, back in the Cold War, and they'd been fed such lies about America, about what America was, that they were really afraid to go to America. And when they got there, they're like, "This is amazing." And they're like, "Whoa, this is like totally not what I was expecting." Yeah, because you've been lied to about the reality of what America is. This is exactly the same, but 30 years later, 50 years later, or whatever. This is just like this is what the West is. This decadent West where you can't put girls in dresses. It's like, no, it's not. But you tell that to people, they're going to believe that. And then she goes, so it's all my preamble. And sorry, I am ranting. But Julia Davis, who translates these and does such an amazing job, well worth following. Russian state TV is telling the viewers that it's better to die than to lose war. So this is a 7-minute excerpt. I've only just shown you that tiny bit. Because I thought it was interesting, that it's better to die than to lose a war to the wicked West, claiming that if they lose, Russians will be on display in Western zoos alongside the animals. What this is doing, as well as, I mean, this is just pure propaganda, load of nonsense. But actually, what she's doing is she's preparing the ground for Russians hearing information about Russia losing this war. And that's more important than the whole kind of straw man of what the West is, right? What she's doing is she's preparing people to accept that Russia are going to lose, but then say it's more important to die. Like I'd rather die than be part of this West. In other words, we might lose this, but everyone, let's not me, but everyone else, because I'm in this case, I'm a woman or I'm a TV presenter or whatever. Not me, but you guys, you mobilize troops, you go over and give your lives because actually it's better to die than live in a Western democracy that is like this. So it's just a really interesting snapshot there of the sort of stuff. I, I I can't believe that she actually believes any of that nonsense, but there you go. She's saying it. Um, there is a really interesting thing that the Institute for the Study of War are now doing, which is about partisan activity. So they've got a new report, which I think they're going to be um, updating consistently. And new Institute Study War has developed an interactive map and timeline tracking verified Ukrainian partisan attacks. We'll update this map as additional attacks are confirmed. The key takeaways are, and there is a thread to this, so I'll read you the key takeaway. The key takeaways are: one, effective Ukrainian partisan attacks are forcing the Kremlin to divert resources away from frontline operations to help secure rear areas, degrading Russians' ability to defend against ongoing Ukrainian counteroffensive, let alone conduct their own offensive operations. So they're having trouble doing any offense at the moment, Russia, really, realistically. Any meaningful stuff like 5 meters around Avdivka, brilliant. But then when you have to worry about stuff going on behind your lines and then stuff happening in Russia, it makes doing the offensive stuff even more difficult. So, poor Russian operational security has enabled Ukrainian partisan attacks. Increasing manpower shortages are likely degrading Russian forces' ability to effectively secure Russian rear areas against partisan attacks and simultaneously defend against Ukrainian counteroffensives. The Kremlin still has not effectively countered Ukraine's organized partisan movement and is unlikely to have the capabilities to do so. And this isn't just happening, though, in Ukraine. This is happening um, in Russia as well. So this is the report, and it makes for interesting reading. I'm not going to read it now, but basically lots of preamble and discussion of different aspects of this and the ramifications of these partisan activities, and then confirmed partisan events in a timeline, and that, as they say, will get updated. And there is a lot of information on there already, and that there will be a lot more, no doubt. I mean, hotspots for partisan activity have been Kherson, a police station recently. The last couple of days was arson attacks there. Loads of cars in the car park in the police station, in the covered car park, were burnt out. Melitopol has been a big place for partisan activity, and I have a feeling Mariupol might be starting to come on the map for that. Less so up and around here because, of course, this has a history of annexation in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, but certainly Melitopol, Kherson, and perhaps soon to be Mariupol as well. So there you go. Something to watch out for and keep an eye on, that ISW account. So there you go. There are the extras I have for you. Um, is there anything else to pay attention to in the live chat? Um, Basically, uh, this has been, fairly rushed for myself in terms of compiling this evidence. So I do apologise um, if it hasn't been as smooth as my pre-recorded stuff has been, but I literally got in from a big drive, cranked open my laptop, got all those Chrome tabs open, and then have sat down, and then just this is stream of consciousness. So, you know, there you go. It is what it is. But thank you for being here. I mean, there's good almost 250 you here, so that's awesome. Um, Thank you for your support. Thanks, Aussie Bugger. I appreciate what you do. I was wondering if you ever get time, if you could do a bit more on the associated frozen conflicts, Moldova, Georgia, as Armenia. These are really there was. I talked previously about there being. Let's try and actually get a map up of Armenia. So Armenia. Okay, so this is the geopolitical area. I talked some time ago about the opportunism. So there's been this long running dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and border issues, and actually Russia have been on Armenia's side. And it's not that it's actually there. It's more complicated than, therefore, Armenia are the bad guys and Azerbaijan are the good guys. Is kind of what I'm saying. It's way more complicated than that. And actually, someone needed to support Armenia. And in fact, it, Nancy Pelosi recently went to Armenia because, actually they needed a bit of assistance, and the Americans politically decided that was a good place for them to be seen. So, but either way, what happened recently when Russia were in a bit of trouble, I can't remember, they're on the back foot for some reason. It might be around a counteroffensive when the lightning counteroffensive was taking place in Kharkiv area up north here, and they moved Izium through Izium and then Liman. You started seeing border disputes, taking place in on the border of Armenia and Azerbaijan, and then where else was it? It was Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. So these guys are being opportunistic. Now, I thought, and maybe I hadn't been paying attention to the news enough, but I thought that would continue and would maybe, you know, even get bigger and more problematic for Russia, because it destabilizes the whole region, and Russia have been the sort of not only the policeman in the region, but also for geopolitical reasons. This is ex-Soviet nations. It's been really important that there's a stability and a unity here, given that most of these countries are now independent republics and what have you. Georgia is a prime example, and then of course Chechnya. So I would think this would be a prime time to get a little bit itchy in some of these countries, and I'm sure they are. I just haven't been paying enough attention to the news, but it's certainly, yeah, absolutely something to look out for. Um, Thank you to Titsol, who is a great, always hangs out, and I see him on other channels as well. He's an avid um, soaker upper of information. That's not really a term, but thank you so much for the super chat there, the super thanks and whatnot. Really appreciate that. Teat Soul, good stuff. Uh, uh, if you have, yeah, everyone loves the stands. Um, yeah, if you have any other questions you wanna get in, I will be heading off in a second because I need some sleep. Uh, uh, just it's been a long weekend, right? It's not the weekend; it's Tuesday. But who knew? I will try to do my usual map and extra tomorrow. I don't know whether the timing might be a little bit different because obviously it's nighttime now and it's going to be a short period of time before tomorrow morning. So it may be a little bit different tomorrow, but I don't know. I will try and get you some more information. And thank you again so much for your support. This is seriously great. This is my favorite way to watch now, better than the video. Good stuff. Nice. Well, thanks for hanging out. I will catch you guys tomorrow. I do really appreciate all the support you guys give me, both in terms of what you say in your comments, because it means that what I do matters and is meaningful because I have an idea in my head of what I find interesting, and what all I'm doing is projecting myself onto the rest of the world by thinking, well, I find this interesting, so therefore everyone else must find this interesting. And of course, that's not necessarily the case. Uh, and so it is. I really do appreciate that you guys, when you guys say, yeah, this is great. I appreciate that because it means that, oh, great, okay, so there is a point in me doing this. So that's really cool. And thanks for all your support in all the different ways. Please like, subscribe, share, hit the bell. I don't know, all that kind of crap. Anyway, take care, guys. I really appreciate you guys being here. Good night to you all. Thanks for hanging out, and I will be around again tomorrow. Toodle pips, and remember, as I say on all my philosophy videos, question everything, but particularly yourselves in this landscape of information war. We need to be paying attention to our sources, collecting a wide variety of sources, and just questioning our own beliefs and our own uh, ideas of what's going on. Just make sure, as Richard Feynman said, the easiest person to fool is yourself. So you got to be aware of that. Anyway, that's my final stuff. Take care. See you tomorrow.